The sky was plunged into deep darkness. There was no visibility. After receiving the signal, 2 quiet shots were fired, causing 2 guards to collapse. The shots continued for the next 15 minutes. When everything went quiet, the radio sounded off. The building has been cleared and is ready for evacuation. 14 years later, I found myself at the window of a hotel room, watching the sunset, remembering how it all started, and thinking about how I ended up here drinking my vodka. The liquid burned in his throat, reflecting the memories of the past few weeks. Nevertheless, I remained hopeful that all was not lost. Did you know 6 weeks ago I accidentally discovered that my wife had been having an affair for the last 12 years? The disclosure happened by accident. But is this how unsuspecting husbands usually find out? By the way, my name is Logan. Jamie and I met during college, dated before graduation. I joined the Marines and she went looking for a job. I loved her at that time, but I didn't want her to marry me when I was somewhere, I don't know where. It would be unfair to her. So 5 years later, after my service in the Marines ended, I returned home, and within a few weeks I got a good job at a large company in their sales department. It turned out that my boss was also a sailor and preferred to hire ex-military personnel because of our disciplined work ethic. I have succeeded in my work by proving myself. At this time, I decided to try my hand at dating sites again. To my pleasant surprise, I found Jamie, my favorite since college, on one of them. God, she looks so good in these photos. Of course, Jamie doesn't have the looks of a supermodel, but she does have a figure. She studied modern dance in college, dividing her time between classes and keeping fit, and she has an amazing figure. Her height is 5 feet 6 inches, with legs resembling those of a dancer. She is not too muscular, but with graceful curves, a magnificent figure. Long, thick, brown hair frames her face, along with dark brown eyes and a smile that melts my heart every time I see her. She is sincere and innocent, with an admixture of passion, just in the right measure. I registered as soon as possible and contacted her immediately. She answered only a week later, asking where I had been all this time and why I hadn't called or texted her in the last 5 years. Is she so upset that I didn't contact her during my time in the Marines that she missed me? It was a very positive sign. Soon we started dating and actually picked up where we left off in college. A year later we got married, and a year later our first daughter, Rebecca, was born. My career was progressing well, although I began to travel more often, which was expected. 2 years later, our second daughter, Amy, appeared in our lives. I have since been promoted, and we now live in a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood with great schools. Although I still travel quite a lot, sometimes for 2 weeks every month, this is a necessity for my work. Shortly after that, Jamie started asking when I was going to reduce the number of trips. She missed my presence. She felt protected when I was at home. I explained that this was a necessary part of my job, assuring her that I would soon be promoted to the next level, significantly reducing my business trips and allowing me to spend more time at home. She reluctantly agreed to this, but was not thrilled with my next trip. Looking back, I should have realized that trouble was coming, but I completely loved and trusted my wife, and this blinded me before the problem began. The first sign was our arguments over trifles. Upon returning home, she accused me of things that had nothing to do with me. If you'd been home more often, this wouldn't have happened, or we need you here instead of wandering around the country. She had a perfectly valid argument, although it took me a while to realize it. The second sign was the discovery of some new lingerie in the laundry. While looking for a shirt, I came across silk panties and a matching silk top. My wife usually has a simple taste, preferring a t-shirt and shorts or sweatpants for sleeping. The only time I bought her something from Victoria's Secret, she only wore it once and never again. However, this underwear was unfamiliar to me, and I assumed that she had bought it for herself. The third sign was a decrease in our activity in bed. Before that, our passionate and romantic rapprochement was decreasing, and she offered various excuses. I was exhausted too. At first it didn't seem like a problem, and I believed that everything would return to normal when my trips decreased. I did not insist on talking to her, realizing that this would only worsen an already difficult situation. The final blow was devastating when it first became clear, and it was hard for me to accept it. A mutual friend saw Jamie with someone at a farmer's market 40 miles from our house. The initial suspicion was on me when he noticed that they were holding hands, laughing, touching each other, and kissing. As he got closer, he realized that it wasn't me. Sensing something unusual, he quietly moved away, following them for a while until they left in a car. I still remember that call. My phone was buzzing when I left the meeting. Frank called me and told me that he had something important to talk about. I told him that I couldn't talk right now, suggesting that we could talk later. Frank agreed and asked me to call him with the least delay, expressing concern in his voice. I assured him that I would call and asked if it was urgent, to which he replied that it could wait. I broke the connection without thinking about the call, believing that Frank would have told me if it was urgent. Later that evening, I called Frank. I asked the reason for his call and what was so important. Frank slowed down before telling me that he had seen my wife with another man earlier that day. I asked if she was with a friend, feeling nervous. Frank was tormented trying to convey the hard news, saying that they seemed like a couple, holding hands, laughing and kissing. He apologized for being the carrier of such news and suggested that my wife might be having an affair. These words hit me so hard that I was left senseless. What made him think that? We were happily married, and she had no reason to be. I couldn't figure it out. The previously noticed hints suddenly became clear, but I resisted the idea. Frank brought me back to reality by expressing an understanding that it was difficult, but I had to be aware. He suggested that there might still be hope to save my marriage, and offered his support, telling me to let me know if I needed anything. I thanked him before hanging up, sitting on the bed and grappling with reality, or a potential cruel joke. While I was thinking, my anger increased at the thought of my wife cheating. During the flight home, I began to calm down and think more clearly about what needs to be done. Without reliable evidence, I didn't know where to start. After landing, my first call was to Frank to find out details about the man she was with. Protecting our daughters from our problems was important. I wanted to save our marriage. Frank advised me not to do anything that I would regret, and shared that he had a friend who had been through a similar situation. He suggested that I talk to him to get an understanding of how to handle the situation, stressing the importance of avoiding problems or making the situation worse. Frank's advice was ringing in my head, and I realized that I needed guidance from someone who was faced with a similar situation. Right now, the best course of action is to go home and act like everything is fine. If she suspects something, it will be harder to find evidence against her. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm sure I saw that day. Frank was right. When I got home, I managed to pull myself together enough to behave normally around Jamie and the girls. It wasn't easy, but I managed somehow. In the following days, I searched the house for any clues about her betrayal, but nothing stood out. However, I continued to have the feeling that I was missing something. Frank called, asking me to talk to his friend. I agreed to meet them at a bar across town the day after work, hiding it from Jamie by mentioning late meetings. In a dirty bar, I found Frank and his friend Mark sitting at a table with beer. Frank looked at me as I sat down. Mark greeted me as the friend Frank mentioned. We greeted each other, although neither of us looked thrilled to see each other. Mark spoke up, having been informed by Frank about my situation. He understood my feelings but warned me against making the same mistakes as he did, telling me about his painful experience of revenge. It led to a 5-year sentence and the loss of everything in a divorce and court case against his wife and her boss. He warned me against doing anything stupid. His gaze was intense. I just nodded. Interested in alternative approaches, I asked him what he would have done differently. Mark admitted that he would have followed the boss anyway, but in a more subtle way to catch him off guard. He expressed deep contempt for the man who stole his wife. As for his wife, knowing what he knows now, he would have chosen divorce. Our conversation then turned to what to do and what not to do in my situation. The first step is to obtain incriminating evidence of his wife's infidelity in order to avoid denial during her confrontation. The second step involved consulting with a divorce lawyer to understand how to protect assets and determine your rights in this situation. The third was to keep a significant amount of money on hand in case she discovered my actions and froze my accounts and credit cards. Finally, it was important to provide a small apartment or an alternative place of residence in case I decided to leave so that I would have a place to stay. All of these recommendations were valid. I initially believed that I could resolve the issue through communication. However, as soon as I mentioned this, Mark slammed his fist on the table. He emphasized the importance of not making any foolish decisions, pointing out that her new boyfriend might be manipulating her. Mark suggested that before confronting my wife, I needed to understand what she had been told and what she believed. Drawing parallels to my military background as a Marine, he highlighted the significance of gathering accurate information in a battle. He stressed the need for a well-defined strategy and plan of action for any unforeseen circumstances, emphasizing the importance of moving forward. His unexpected question about my military service caught me off guard, and I acknowledged that I had indeed served as a Marine. Surprised by its relevance, I pressed for an explanation, and Mark continued to stress the necessity of having a thought-out plan and strategy, relating it to my current situation. I sighed, struggling to accept the possibility that my seemingly happy marriage could be facing this predicament. Mark quietly apologized, and we sat in silence until Frank interrupted, inquiring about my plan and how I intended to handle the situation. Realizing the necessity, I expressed my desire to salvage my marriage if possible. However, more than anything, I yearned for the other man to suffer without endangering my own freedom. I made it clear that obtaining evidence and gathering information about my adversary was of utmost priority. Mark smiled at my last statement and advised against hiring a private investigator, recalling his own expensive and unproductive experience. Instead, he suggested checking her bank statements, credit card records, and phone logs for any suspicious activities. Furthermore, he proposed the possibility of her using a second cell phone and recommended setting up hidden video cameras around the house to capture both visual and audio evidence. Despite the discomfort, I reluctantly agreed, determined to make him pay. Our conversation continued for another hour, during which I mentally noted the suggestions provided by Mark. His advice emphasized the importance of not discussing the situation at work until I identified my wife's potential lover, considering the risk of someone familiar with my schedule catching on. He also mentioned that he would have approached his wife's lover in a more subtle manner, fueling my determination to outsmart this individual. However, I realized I needed more information and assistance. The following workday, I carefully reviewed my upcoming travel plans for the next month and discovered a 2-day trip. Concerned about someone at work, knowing my schedule, I discreetly approached my boss, suggesting the idea of extending the client visit to a whole week. He readily approved the proposition. The next step involved creating the illusion of being away while secretly returning. With a prepaid debit card and cash, I purchased a return ticket on a different airline. Online, I acquired several spy cameras and a high-quality camera with excellent zoom and low-light capabilities. These cover devices formed the initial phase of my plan to uncover the identity of this person. The second phase aimed to capture them in the act on video, eliminating any doubts of my wife's infidelity. I dedicated my day to meticulous plotting and planning, a skill in which I excelled. However, the crucial missing piece of information was the identity of the man involved. Until that was resolved, I couldn't trust anyone, not even my best friend and boss, Hall. Realizing that discovering this person's name would require time, I remained resolute. By the end of the week, all the ordered items had been delivered to Frank's residence. Now, all I needed was the opportunity to discreetly install the spy cameras around my house. With Jamie's habitual Saturday shopping routine with her girls and mother, the house would be empty. After several hours, all the cameras were strategically placed and successfully tested. I could even monitor their feeds in real time from my tablet or laptop, via the internet, to observe any unusual activities. With the cameras in position, I proceeded to search the house for any potential clues. Initially, I scrutinized the credit card statements for any abnormal charges, followed by a thorough inspection of her closets to check for any new, more provocative attire. While my search didn't yield concrete evidence, I stumbled upon a few recently acquired items, including a very short red dress she had never worn before. The idea of her wearing it for someone other than me troubled me deeply. Despite the absence of definitive proof, the red dress symbolized a departure from her usual style, leaving me in need of some time for introspection. Opting for a 5-mile jog in my running shorts and shoes, my regular long-distance run usually brought me solace and mental clarity upon my return. As I arrived home, spotting Jamie's car parked in the driveway, I knew my daughters, my angels, were back home. Their cheerful voices and laughter as I entered never failed to bring a smile to my face. Calling out to Jamie, I was joyfully embraced by my girls as they ran from the family room, eager to share the details of their day. Jamie appeared from the kitchen, asking about my run and giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before sending the girls away. After preparing dinner, pork chops, I took a refreshing shower and we had our evening meal, followed by putting our daughters to bed. In the family room, we sat together and watched TV. However, my mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Jamie's behavior during my trips, causing me to pay little attention to the screen. Overwhelmed by everything, I decided it was time for an early bedtime and retreated to our bedroom. While in the bedroom, I noticed Jamie's purse sitting on the oak chest and decided to take a chance by searching for any potential clues. To my dismay, I stumbled upon a cheap cell phone that I had never seen before. Curiosity got the best of me, so I turned it on and recorded the phone number before reviewing the call log. Only one number stood out as unfamiliar, which I made note of before powering off the phone. The discovery of this newfound evidence made it impossible for me to deny any longer that Jamie was having an affair. Heartbroken and consumed by a desire for revenge, I recalled Mark's advice to avoid acting impulsively and decided to exercise patience. Changing quickly, I climbed into bed and pretended to be asleep when Jamie eventually joined me, avoiding any conversation that might accidentally reveal my knowledge. The following days were a challenge as I attempted to maintain a sense of normalcy while carrying the weight of damning proof against Jamie. As another business trip approached, I stuck to my usual routine of packing my bags into the car. Right before leaving, I casually asked Jamie if she had any special plans during my absence, receiving a strange look as she mentioned her usual routine. With possible explanations racing through my mind, I bid a hasty goodbye and headed to the airport, secretly hoping that the security cameras in our house would capture her rendezvous with the other person. Despite hoping that Jamie would have the decency not to bring him into our bed, I couldn't help but become increasingly certain that she would never have cheated on me before all of this happened. In the days that followed, I wrapped up my work with the client at an astonishing speed and started packing up, preparing to return home. That evening, I diligently monitored the video feeds from the cameras, but found nothing out of the ordinary. And so I decided to review the earlier recordings. Since the system recorded whenever someone entered a room equipped with a camera, storing all the footage centrally and making it accessible remotely, I fast-forwarded through the recordings from that particular day. And then, I stumbled upon a moment where Jamie was using her secret cell phone. Intrigued, I stopped and rewound the video to observe her answering the call. Despite the poor audio quality, I managed to hear enough. She was talking to someone, referring to them as baby. They discussed my absence for the week and the logistics of discreetly meeting at a motel. Though I desperately wanted to hear the rest of the conversation, Jamie laughed and turned her back to the camera, making it impossible for me to catch the entirety of their discussion. When she turned back, she continued, instructing the person to park down the street at a coffee shop a few blocks away. "Okay, baby, I can't wait. I'll see you tomorrow night," she said. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. He was going to be in my house in our bed. Thoughts of disposing of his body crossed my mind, but Mark's warning echoed, urging me not to act rashly. Suppressing my anger, I made up my mind to wait for the right moment, even though the strain was becoming unbearable. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything and the mother of our 2 children, was betraying me. Why was she doing this? What had driven her into the arms of another man? The flight back home felt agonizingly quick. I wasn't prepared for what awaited me. So, I checked into a hotel and pondered my next move. I knew that tonight was the night he would be coming to my house, and I was determined to see him with my own eyes. Who was he? Was he someone I knew, or perhaps someone from my workplace? I needed to find out before deciding how to proceed. Uncertain of the exact time he would arrive, I parked near the coffee shop down the street, waiting there despite not knowing what he looked like. To ensure my safety, I rented a car from the airport and found a spot with a good view of the parking lot. Equipped with a camera, I checked its zoom quality. I could position myself at least 100 yards away and still manage to capture a close-up view of his face and license plate. Around 9 p.m., a silver BMW M3 pulled into the parking lot. I started snapping pictures, and thankfully, the lighting was favorable, allowing me to get a clear view of his face. I didn't recognize him. He parked on the opposite side of the lot, far away from the coffee shop, and began walking towards my house. As I sat there, I took a deep breath to control my rage. I connected to the coffee shop's Wi-Fi and accessed the cameras in my house. After several agonizing minutes, I witnessed him enter and share a passionate kiss with my wife. Suppressing my fury, I listened intently to their conversation. Throughout the entire day, he continuously shared his thoughts about her. They had an in-depth conversation about having the house to themselves until the next morning. This was made possible because she had thoughtfully sent the kids over to her parents' place for the night. Meanwhile, I wouldn't be back until Friday, so their plan seemed quite considerate. As I observed them undressing in our living room, it became clear that their intentions were not innocent. They wasted no time and, within a few moments, found themselves completely naked, their hands exploring each other's bodies. Sensing the growing intensity, she suggested they move their activities to the bedroom, and they quickly raced towards the stairs, disappearing from the camera's view. The sound of their laughter echoed through the house as they left their clothes scattered across the floor. It was at this moment that I knew I had to take action. Luckily, I had just parked my car and rushed towards our house. Unsurprisingly, the front door was left unlocked to facilitate their hurried descent upstairs, making my task easier. Without hesitation, I went straight for his pants, discovering not only his wallet but also all the necessary information I needed, and a little extra as well. Holding his wallet in my hand, I made my way to my home office on the first floor, situated opposite our bedroom to minimize the risk of being caught. I switched on my computer and the printer scanner, patiently waiting for them to power up. Once they were ready, I began scanning the contents of Stephen Bannister's wallet, meticulously copying his driver's license and other relevant details. After returning the wallet, I captured photographs of their discarded clothes and discreetly recorded their encounter using the camera's video feature. Silently, I ascended the stairs, the faint sounds of their lovemaking intensifying, which only served to irritate me further. The bedroom door was wide open, and they were completely oblivious to my presence, convinced that they had the entire house to themselves. Slowly, I approached the bedroom, their voices growing louder. As I reached the doorway, I stood there, observing Steve lying on his back, completely undressed, while my wife straddled him in the classic 69 position, both pleasuring each other. Their intense focus allowed me to take a few steps into the room, completely unnoticed. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that the hidden cameras didn't provide the highest definition footage, and I desired nothing less than high-definition evidence. I recorded several minutes of their intimate encounter before restraining my urge to grab a baseball bat and attack him. Mark's wise words echoed in my mind, reminding me not to do anything reckless. So I slowly backed out of the room and left the house. As I drove back to the hotel, my mind was consumed by chaos, and a newfound level of hatred coursed through my veins. I couldn't remember ever feeling this enraged, and the intensity of it began to frighten me. Unable to find solace in sleep, I decided to clear my mind and release some of the anger through my usual morning run.